afternoon. My name is Susan Derwin. I'm the director of the Interdisciplinary Humanities Center, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the inaugural lecture of the IHC's 2024-25 Public Events Series, Key Passages. This year, we will be considering processes of transition and experiences of transformation. Our speakers will explore historical events, social movements, and passages both to the known and unknown worlds. They will also consider how the passage of time is variously marked and conceptualized in relation both to human life and other life forms. Finally, a number of speakers will consider key passages in literature and music and the passage of literature into music, all of which have opened new directions in artistic fields. Today, however, we will be inaugurating our series with a passage that Professor Sowon Park has been exploring in many different ways, namely the passage of human creativity into the field of AI-generated art. Professor Park is an associate professor of English who specializes in British modernism, political fiction, world literature, and the relationship between literature and other forms of knowledge, in particular, cognitive neuroscience. Before coming to UCSB, she was a lecturer in English at Corpus Christi College, Oxford, and she has also taught at Cambridge, as well as at other institutions in South Korea, Germany, and the UK. Her publications range widely from texts on Virginia Woolf and suffrage fiction to others on East Asian modernist literature and neurocognitive literary criticism. She co-edits Global Asias and Critical Interventions in Medical and Health Humanities, and she serves on the editorial board of numerous literary journals. She is also a K-pop blogger. Currently, she is co-PI of a 5-year trauma-informed pedagogy project, and she is the creator and convener of the Unconscious Memory Network, a forum where literary scholars and cognitive neuroscientists discuss and exchange their research findings on diverse aspects of unconscious memory. We are very happy that Professor Park agreed to open this year's Key Passages series with a talk that will raise the question of whether and how the explosion of AI into all areas of human expression marks a passage into a new era of human creativity. Please help me welcome her.
Thank you, Susan, for the invitation, and thanks everyone for coming. So what I would like to do today is to kick off the IHC theme of the year, namely key passages, with reference to the recent developments in AI writing, otherwise known as writing generated by ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, DeepMind, Mistral, Claude Opus, Sonnet, and many others. Ask one of these chatbots what it can do, and it will answer something like this. And I take my example from a real-life case of a dialogue between the New York Times tech writer Kevin Roose and Sydney, which is a chatbot made by Microsoft Bing. What can you do, Sydney? Kevin asks. And Sydney says, I have many abilities that I am proud of, such as generating poems, stories, code, essays, songs, celebrity parodies, and more. I can also perform web searches and provide relevant and interesting information. I can communicate fluently in many languages. I can generate suggestions for the next user turn. I can do a lot of things. Not only can Sydney do all these things, Sydney can do them in a matter of seconds and keep doing them without needing to take a break. So for those of us in this room who have spent a great part of our lives learning the art and craft of how to write, what Sydney does is breathtaking, mind-spinning, and quite a bit concerning. But here we are in 2024, all of us thrown into this brave new world, propelled towards what many see as the great superhuman future. Nevertheless, In the middle of the techno-futurist triumphalism surrounding generative AI, there is a question at the back of a lot of people's minds, which is, where exactly are we going with all this? So today, I am going to commit the folly of trying to grapple with this question, grapple with the wider ramifications of this technology, not from a lofty high-tech point of view that we get from Google and Microsoft and various business schools, but from a humanist perspective, as a reader, editor, writer, and teacher of literature who is, among other things, working on how writing systems shape cognition and culture. It is a folly because the voice of a humanist does not tend to carry much weight in AI discussions. Nevertheless, I think that it is worthwhile to try and make a case for the relevance of literary expertise when it comes to the subject of writing during this key passage. The writer's point of view bears thinking about, first because, all the hoopla notwithstanding, the actual use of generative AI ranges very widely from writer to writer. A few early adopters may use ChatGPT every day, sometimes for hours and hours, and I know of at least one person who wouldn't dream of taking a long drive without chatting to ChatGPT using the voice mode. Equally, there are others who have tried it, saw no reason to use it, and reject it completely. As one colleague said to me, it does a very poor job of what my brain has already been trained to do perfectly well. It's of no help to me. But if I were to hazard a guess, a solid majority of us are ambivalent, curious, but also cautious, and generally skeptical about the grand claims that have been made about it. So, for example, let's take the latest predictions made by the ever-optimistic futurist Ray Kurzweil, author of The Singularity is Near in 2005, and more recently this year, The Singularity is Nearer, whose latest assertions can be read in the October issue of MIT Tech Review. Kurzweil is confident about where it is that we are heading, and according to him, the future is just wonderful. He writes, by the end of this decade, AI will surpass humans at all cognitive tasks, igniting the scientific revolution that futurists have long imagined. Digital scientists, and by scientists he's referring to AI, will have perfect memory of every research paper ever published and think 1,000,000 times faster than we can. Our plodding progress in fields like robotics, nanotechnology, and genomics will become a sprint. Within the lifetimes of most people alive today, society will achieve radical material abundance, and medicine will conquer aging itself. Technology will serve our deepest human aspirations to learn, create, and connect. Learning itself will become vastly richer. Instead of getting lost in a crowded lecture hall, you will work one-on-one with a supremely patient digital tutor that has been trained by the greatest teachers on earth and knows exactly how you learn best. AI tools will also supercharge your creativity. Today, expressing your artistic impulses require both technical skill and resources. These bottlenecks keep countless brilliant ideas trapped in people's heads, and we are all poorer for it. But systems like Midjourney and Sora let us glimpse a different future. You'll be able to speak a painting into being like a muse in Rembrandt's ear, or you'll hum a tune and then work with a digital Wagner to orchestrate it into a symphony. Now, if you think that this is all a little bit exaggerated, I think this is no more than a logical culmination of 21st century Western societies that prize efficiency, productivity, and material progress as human ideals to which we should all aspire. In this context, it goes without saying that faster is better, more is better. These ideals are embraced mostly without effective criticism or real opposition. And I think perhaps, rather randomly, the Olympic slogans summarize the zeitgeist best. Higher, faster, stronger. Sydney and company are gold medalists in this race, outpacing and outprocessing data far beyond human imagination. Yet, do the proclamations about great AI leap forward match up with what's happening on the ground? Are we all on board with sprinting towards gold? Yes, ChatGPT can summarize, but can it also create? Fortunately, I was able to put some of these questions to the test this spring when I had the great pleasure of participating on an experiment of sorts. This is when Professor Miguel Eckstein, who's in the audience today, the director of the Mind and Machine Initiative at UCSB, set the theme of the 2024 annual summit as AI and human creativity and invited humanists to participate. For those of you who are not terribly familiar with this project, it's a cross-disciplinary research center that investigates the human mind in relation to AI, and we're very fortunate to have this research center on campus. And Miguel had the brilliant idea of hosting an AI-inclusive competition in literature, in music, and in the visual arts as part of the 2024 initiative. So in what follows, I'll give you a brief overview of the competition, give an account of what happened, and then go on to make some larger points about the impact of AI on creativity based on this particular experiment. And the competition was, so we have Professor Eckstein here, and the competition had parameters which went something like this. I don't know whether you can see this bit. The contest aimed to compare the creative capabilities of humans, AI, and human-AI collaboration. The submitted short story, art, music will be judged with no knowledge of whether the entries were created by AI, human-AI collaboration, or human only. AI-generated work, in part or whole, and human-only generated work, all accepted and all welcome. So that was the premise. And when you entered the competition, you had to have a separate PDF documentation of how you came to create the story. So you had to tick whether it was just me, or I collaborated, or it was just AI only. And then you had to provide documentation about the specific prompts that you used if you were using AI, and if you were not using AI, how you came to generate the story. And as I said, the judges did not get to see the documentation when they were judging. And in literature, my fellow judges were Matthew Reynolds at Oxford, who's an academic but also a novelist, and he does a lot of translation as well, and Professor Stephen Rachman at Michigan State, who's a digital humanist. In the other categories, we had in music, Leslie Hogan, Andrew Watson, Richard Wang, and visual arts, George Lugrady, who's in the audience today, and he's happy to make some comparative observations after the talk, Jeff O'Brien and Deborah Herrick. And going back to literature, we were all really very excited about this competition because it's the first of its kind. And before we got to reading the entries, we tried to make explicit the thoughts and questions we had about the competition that's at the forefront of our minds, so we can clarify the set of interpretive assumptions that we are bringing to bear on the texts. And our key preoccupations went something like this. We kept thinking about, will AI make human writing redundant? Will machine-generated literature be clunky and bot-like? Will we be able to tell which is which? And will AI inclusivity open the door to new creativity? Will we find new forms? So these were the key questions we had before the competition. But the biggest one was this: who will win? Will it be a human? Will it be the machine? Or will it be the combination? And during the discussion, we noted very quickly that the affective energy animating the prejudging conversation turned very quickly to the trope of man versus machine. I think it's very important to acknowledge at this point that we have a lot of fear about the possibility of machines surpassing humans and what happens when machines start taking over, which we acknowledged. As Stephen Rackman put it, conversations about AI make me think of great competitions between humankind and machines. Mythic ones, such as John Henry versus a steam-powered drill driving steel to build a railroad, or actual ones such as Garry Kasparov, the world chess champion versus Deep Blue, IBM supercomputing chess engine. In my thoughts turn to the 2016 AlphaGo competition in Korea. I am Korean. When the legendary Go player Isedol, who's a wunderkind, I mean, he had been playing Go his entire life, 18 times world champion, played AlphaGo, developed by DeepMind, and AlphaGo emerged as the winner, 4-1, and the fourth competition, Isedol won, and the celebration we had, like, yay, humans winning. It was just enormous. But what really I was left with when Lee lost and he gave his interview, he was saying that although he lost, he was so moved and inspired by the beauty of AlphaGo's moves, especially move 37. So back to our competition, we had 41 entries, and although I didn't know this at the time when I was reading the stories, 16 were written by humans only, machine-generated 4, and then the human collaboration was 21. I thought I was a little bit surprised that there were 16 human-only entries, but and I'll give you a little bit of an idea of the kind of work that we got, and I invite you to share something of my experience of judging by when I read the sections, trying to guess, is this by a human, or is this by AI, or is this kind of collaboration, and see if you can tell. So this is essay, the first essay, Echoes of Steel and Flesh is the title, and it goes like this. With Eli by her side, Mara felt whole again. As Mara and Eli explored the outskirts together, Mara found herself drawn to a small clearing in the woods where shafts of golden sunlight danced through the leaves above. Sitting together on a fallen log, Mara and Eli watched as a gentle breeze stirred the branches ahead, sending a shower of golden leaves cascading down around them. So this is kind of a little section from a short story called Echoes of Steel and Flesh. Next sample is a story called Being Ashore is a Trap. And it goes like this. Every creature of the sea boasts of being ashore, but my detective eye witnessed their fate, sealed with ginger and green onions upon arrival. They're blanched, stir-fried, and consumed with voracity. Cute fish you can't escape. And then the third sample is, you're only acting, Kay told me. Kay was correct. I do not possess emotions like humans do. It is a justifiable statement to say that whatever I feel remains a simulation, therefore an act. The desert stretched out endlessly, vast and peaceful. The sand seemed to go on forever, dunes rising and falling like an endless ocean, frozen in time. So the question, will we be able to tell which is which you will remember was a question that the judges raised before seeing the documentation file. It should be obvious from this short sample that it is impossible to tell. And now I'll tell you which is which. So first one, Eli Mara, this was machine generated. It took less than an hour, and this is Sarah. Yeah, Sarah Bacon had been writing less than 1 year. The second one, Being Ashore is a Trap, was entirely human written. And it took between 15 and 30 hours and writing experience under a year. And the last example was a human-machine collaboration. It took less than 5 hours, and Rachel had been writing for less than a year. And Rachel Chang is, of course, the winner of the competition, author of the winning story Stargazers. I don't know if Rachel's here today. I was hoping that Rachel might come, but anyway. She has an interview on the Melichamp website. And this was Rachel's process. This is how she came to create this story. She asked, what would a robot find interesting about stargazing? And when she got the answer, she conceived the plot by drawing inspiration from the answer. Then she wrote the draft in a code-switching manner. Rachel is a visiting exchange student, incorporating both traditional Chinese and English. She's a literature student as well, yeah. And then she used Claude 3 Sonnet to translate the entire text into English, and then she revised it herself. And there are other specific things that she asked AI to do. So now that was the competition. So I'll now return to the question posed that we posed before the competition and tackle them based on the findings. So the questions: will AI make human writing redundant? No is my answer, and I'll return to why I think so. Will machine-generated literature be clunky and bot-like? And the answer is not more than human writing. It turns out that humans write more mechanistically and in bot-like ways than machines. One very important insight that this experiment yielded is that the 4 AI-generated stories did not score the lowest. They were, all 4 of them, solidly in the middle. And this has implications for all of us in this room teaching and grading, because today AI is a lot better at descriptive, standardized writing and realistic dialogue than a lot of people. The third question, will we be able to tell which is which? As you saw, no, it's impossible to tell. Unless, is there anybody in this room who got all 3 right? Well, but you know, I don't know whether you could get all 41 right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I got so many wrong. And will AI inclusivity open the door to new creativity and new forms? No, or not yet, on the basis of what we read. It was striking to all 3 judges how many entries were based on good versus evil, ending in a didactic resolution. So it was very black and white with a neat ending. However, this can't be entirely blamed on AI, because this was true of all the entries across the 3 categories. So it probably has to do with a youthful outlook on life. I don't think one can necessarily draw the conclusion that AI is good at describing but bad at plotting, not yet anyway. But in this competition, we didn't see any innovation of form. There was no equivalent of Move 37, alas. But there were a few other insights, and first is about time. So all 4 AI-generated stories took less than an hour to write, probably minutes to write. No surprise there. However, it was a surprise to me that human-written stories did not take the longest to write. In fact, human-AI collaboration often took much longer than just human-written ones. So it's actually incorrect to think that the use of generative AI saves time. In literature, you can't really think a story into being in the manner that Kurzweil predicts. Not yet, anyway. Second is about what tech people call prompt engineering strategies. Many human-AI collaborations took a lot of ingenuity and judgment. For example, you saw in Rachel's Stargazers, there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of very creative thinking. In AI-enabled writing, like Rachel's, prompting is the deciding criteria for success. Prompting engineering strategy used well can neutralize the comparative weaknesses of writers. Before Sydney, we could check spelling, we could check grammar, we could check punctuation, but now we have a lot more options. Some contestants asked AI to switch the main character's gender and change all the behavioral traits and speech patterns accordingly, and kept on doing this until they got the version that they wanted. Many contestants wrote in a different language from English, then translated into English, translated it back and forth, then revised the final version. AI greatly facilitates authors writing in languages other than English, because they can write in their native language while at the same time check how it translates over into English and modify as they go along. AI offers a lot more options for people to play to their comparative strengths. Therefore, I think it will certainly accelerate the growth of what's called the global novel, or born-translated novel. Novel writing software, like Pseudowrite or story engineering, now makes novel writing accessible for everyone. Just as YouTube made it possible for everyone to have their own TV channel of sorts, as it were, AI enables everyone to have a go at fiction writing if that is what you want. My third point is not on what we gain, but what we lose. There are many things we lose, but this is, I think, key, which is allusion as a literary technique. For non-literary people in the room, this is what illusion is. So when you read Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, and you have Mr. Ramsay walking around rambling, and he keeps on saying, somebody had blundered. Anybody with a literary training can recognize this is a line from Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade. And so by alluding to The Charge of the Light Brigade, Virginia Woolf is able to critique the Victorian male mind by referencing the military blunders of the 19th century in the British Empire without actually having to say a single word about it. So this is allusion as a literary technique, which is one of the most powerful things that we can do. And the ability to recognize passages in other literary texts and to establish the relations between this text and that text used to be a key part of a literary training. And this ability was highly rewarded historically in many cultures. And when I was a student, the most esteemed critics were the people who could do this, who had the memory to kind of spot certain sections in other texts. Christopher Ricks was a genius at doing this. And that kind of has died down because it's not rewarded anymore. I mean, this ability to hear resonances used to be, for example, in Korea, where I'm from, for 1,000 years, the absolute criterion for the National Civil Service examinations, which really tested the candidate's ability to recall key passages in certain texts and have kind of a literary trajectory, a thread. So learning itself was centered around this kind of building a concordance in one's mind. And this skill doesn't have uses today because you can do a search now. And very few people bother about keeping this alive. But the loss of the elusive method is a blow because in literature, what is not said and what is not sayable are important, just as important as what is said and what can be said. And allusion is one of the most effective ways of communicating something without actually saying it. T.S. Eliot's poem, The Wasteland, for example, is a mosaic of quotations from a range of sources, including the demotic, and as such an extraordinary culmination of the history of literature as well as a critique of it. You say things, but you can imply 7 different things at once. Because writing generated by AI only feeds back to us what we feed into it, and nothing is attributed, it's extremely difficult to make use of allusions and establish an intertextual relation with words intentionally. And this is one big reason why writers don't like using ChatGPT, because of the attribution factor. So now I will turn to the concluding part of my talk by returning to the question of, will AI make human writing redundant? And I said no. Short answer, no, but why not? And I give 2 main reasons. First, because the goal of human creative writing is, for the most part, completely different from AI-generated writing and cannot therefore be replaced by it. People feel compelled to write because if they don't, the inner flow of life that we sense but do not understand and is not understood by society just go unaddressed, unperceived, unacknowledged. And the desire to break that gap, or bridge that gap, break that silence, and make sense of things is a very deep human need. Professor Julie Carson, who's in the audience today, is currently writing a book on this very topic called Anxious to Write, the need to create and make meaning for oneself through writing, although it does create a lot of anxiety. So AI-generated writing can only be seen as an epistemic advance if we invalidate the power of writing to create a coherent reality for oneself, one's culture, one's history. It is progress if only we disregard the joy. And I quote Virginia Woolf on this topic of writing, which she called moments of being. And she wrote, "I feel that I've had a blow, but it is not, as I thought as a child, simply a blow from an enemy hidden behind the cotton wool of daily life. It is or will become a revelation of some order. It is a token of some real thing behind appearances, and I make it real by putting it into words. It is only by putting it into words that I make it whole. This wholeness means that it has lost its power to hurt me. It gives me, perhaps because by doing it so I take away the pain, a great delight to put the severed parts together. Perhaps this is the strongest pleasure known to me. It is the rapture I get when in writing I seem to be discovering what belongs to what, making a scene come right, making a character come together. From this, I reach what I might call a philosophy, that behind the cotton wool is hidden a pattern, that we, and I mean all human beings, are connected with this, that the whole world is a work of art, and that we are parts of the work of art. And the urge to set words down to paper is extremely strong, so strong that it has often been characterized as an act of surrender to a muse or a demon or to divine inspiration. Creative inspiration, at least in the way that great writers have described it, does not meet the necessary condition of rational exploration. It has nothing to do with the culture of higher, stronger, faster. The job of a creative writer is to chronicle the invisible and the unsayable, to lift the cotton wool of habitual perception and revivify life. So the analogy between literature and technology, or literature and sport, does not actually hold. We've had tremendous successes in technology, but literature does not improve in the same way. Literature does not progress. One cannot say that Milton wrote better than Shakespeare, Woolf better than Dickens. Literature is not a competition, although we have fun with competitions. We do not come to write better, only what is true of our time. This is one reason why crediting art, and whether it's verbal or visual or auditory, is so valuable. They keep at front and center what is very difficult to acknowledge. They do the very difficult job of recognizing activities of the mind that are hard to conceptualize in an evidence-based, data-driven, empiricist, positivist, gold medal-seeking culture. So in this passage to a new literary culture, we need to remind ourselves that some things like creative inspiration cannot be prompted or willed, that it's foolish to sprint before one is ready. But the inner flow of life is as irrefutable as it is subtle once you recognize its presence, and that this is where all art begins. Thank you very much. So in the audience, we're very lucky to have Professor George Lugrady, who was the judge of the visual arts competition. It'd be just wonderful if we could hear a few words about that process.
Thank you. So, hi, everybody. So I have nothing planned, but I'll just share a couple of thoughts about my experience as an image maker, and thank you for this very thought-provoking presentation. I learned computing starting in 1981 from a painter named Harold Cohen. Actually, I didn't learn from him. He just gave me a key to his studio. And at the time, he was writing a program. He was an abstract painter. He was writing a program that would paint like him. And so the concept and the program that he had set for himself was pretty challenging. Basically, he had to somehow encode into language the process by which a human begins by making a mark on a canvas and eventually building up an image. And I remember Harold telling me that this software one day is going to take over what I do. A couple of years ago, maybe 7 years ago or so, Harold passed away, and just before he passed away, he told me the program is a pretty good assistant. It took him about 40 years to identify the fact that the software itself is not exactly the same living thing as the human. And one of the reasons, one of the big challenges in AI is to what degree can we translate, or to what degree can we give the machine the power of continuous evaluation and response to current living situations. Maybe I'll stop there.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I'm curious if part of our idea, which I think we all have this idea intuitively, that what separates human art from machine art is some kind of internal inspiration, then do we also need to sort of address the idea that beauty or artistic inspiration can come from nature, or it can come from facets of the external world that aren't subject to human intention? In other words, can we sort of rescue the intentionality that separates human art from machine art without rejecting the other human tendency that I think is complementary to find beauty in the natural and non-intentional?
That's a very interesting point. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, I mean, I think there's sort of a classical aesthetic problem of, can a natural thing be a work of art, or can a work of art be made by accident?
Yeah.
And I think if we answer yes, it's very difficult to differentiate machine art, which is made sort of by accident or non-intentionally, from human art. Do you agree that that entailment exists, or do you think there's a difference between the machine-produced art and the sort of fully non-intentional, accidental work of art?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question like you, I had to write about when I was a student. Can a work of art be created accidentally, and the role of intentionality in human-made pieces. And I don't know about visual art, because I think actually there are huge differences. But because language is so intimately tied to creating a sense of self in ways that music and visual arts, they're not exactly the same, because language constitutes consciousness. It provides a conceptual grid of the reality that we confront, without which we cannot function. And so I think storytelling, we like to think that storytelling is literature, but it isn't. Storytelling is one component of literature. Literature does a lot of things more than just tell stories, which is kind of sense-making as human beings. And so without intentionality, the whole essay question, if you had a monkey at the typewriter, accidentally type, like a Shakespeare play, would this be regarded as a work of art? And because there is no intentionality, there is no communication, there is no connection to another, my point of view is that if I read an AI-generated novel and then discovered there was no human intention behind it, I would not be moved. But that is just me. But other people will have other things. And one thing that ChatGPT has unleashed is the big industry, because now it was only in like Hollywood film studios where you could have all these hypotheticals and you had the money to do it, but anybody can do it. And so you can actually have a lot of storylines, change the characters, change the whatever. So we're bound to have a lot of dopamine spiking, addictive narratives surrounding us. And at the same time, I still think that the traditional human need to make sense of what's happening in the world through symbols, through allusions, that will never go away, because it is such a profound human need, and we get such joy out of it.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I had a question about part of the presentation that I guess I had sort of a hard time fully understanding, which is the notion that AI, like the process of creating things through AI, is inclusive. I know for me, as an artist and as a scholar, I find that there's so much beauty when people create art without having been educated through really rigid systems or having to sort of perform to the market. I think of books like Trout Fishing in America or Miss Macintosh, My Darling. And because these language models are trained on things that are commercially viable, rather than a person sort of working through the limitations of their voice or using the things around them, they're instead given something that is, I think, considered acceptable or good or polished in the way that we get AI art, fed back as something that feels very complete. And so I don't know, I feel like I have a very hard time resolving this notion that it allows people to do something, but sort of at the expense of the process of learning through doing and creating things that are authentic to a voice that might not be confined by convention.
Well, I think authenticity is an interesting word. And I think the value of authenticity only comes, it's self-bound, i.e., is it authentic to you? Whether it's authentic to other people is neither here nor there, because it cannot be established. But the whole point of writing is to make something real for you. And if other people can enjoy it, that's wonderful. And it's not a competition. Of course, we have big prizes, Nobel Award prizes. It doesn't mean that a writer is the best writer in the world. It's not like the Olympics. And the value of art is first and foremost in the creation of it, that it matters to you. That's how I think about it. And therefore, you can have all the, big Netflix like narratives, and that's fine. And there's bound to be a ton of those. But I think, just like with the invention of like motor cars and everybody started to drive, you have jogging as coming with it. Silicon Valley, you have meditation. There's gonna be two extremes, I think.
Okay. So you said that maybe the value of art comes in the production of it,
Yes.
right? And I think
so.
Jung, talks about that as well.
Yeah.
You get at, something that's beyond yourself, something kind of mystical. If AI allows people who maybe have never considered making art or have felt that they don't have those skills,
Yeah.
does that not
Yeah.
have a great importance?
I think so.
Potentially for the
This
society?
is why it's it can do so many things. Like literally anybody can write a novel now. The novel writing software, some good, not bad. And I have to say, in the competition, people who use specifically the literary ones did better, and that's a lot of fun. You can have a go, and you can get better, and you can learn from it. But that in itself is not that different from all the other tools that writers have been using forever and always, rhyming dictionaries, thesaurus. I mean, it's just another tool, a better tool, and it really levels the playing ground a little bit, because you don't need years and years of training to be able to start. Just get a software and get going. And also, English speakers do not have such an advantage in the publishing market anymore, because you can translate. And also we have access to different languages that we can kind of recognize but not really have a command of. So it's opened up writing to many more people in very interesting ways, and I'm sure a lot of exciting things will happen. And my key point is, but that is not everything. Yeah.
It's a wonderful talk, Sowon, especially the last part. The conclusion was very moving and powerful. I'm going to ask you for a copy of it at some point. Having said that, I wonder whether it would be possible to disassociate the concept of writing from that of creating. The writing that you are celebrating here so powerfully is a paradigm that exists roughly from about 1750 to maybe World War II, and it's very individual, auteur-oriented. But if we look prior and later, might there be different modes of communication that are associated with different models of creativity? So for example, in oral societies, maybe ChatGPT really is chatting. That is, it is a kind of an oral social creature without any innerness to it. It just repeats things that the society is, saying to itself. So creativity in that odor mode isn't inner-driven, but village-driven. Or again, after the span that I mentioned, the individual model of creativity today is so often replaced by entire game or film studios, collectives of people who, you cannot really ascribe to a Hollywood studio interiority or creativity in that sense, but rather a kind of let's just get all the scripts together, mash them together, and create something out of that sort, like ChatGPT would do. So the question is whether the question of creativity and writing are actually two different questions.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I can see that the notion of an individual consciousness working its way through may align very well with 17th century Protestant ways of thinking about the individual. But actually, if you look at the classical Chinese tradition, 2,000 years of establishing a moral relationship with the world through writing, that's what writing means, mun, is to establish a moral relationship with the community as a person, as an individual person with moral responsibilities. You also look at the Arabic tradition. So I don't think that the inner flow of life is a Western invention. It has always existed and it will always exist, although it was emphasized in a particular way in Europe in the 17th century. I'm not quibbling against that, but it does have a wider and longer history.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I'm an engineering student, so I apologize if my wording isn't as eloquent as yours. But my question is in a similar vein to what the previous asker asked. Because these models are trained on a corpus of data that is kind of incentivized to reflect the societal beliefs or, as you described, create dopamine receptors or reward the models for this kind of writing. How do you feel about the model's responses and effects on industries of writing outside of creative writing, like things like journalism or article writing? These kind of industries where it's less of a the value is less personal and this kind of I apologize for like taking time to describe this, but it's in these kind of professions, it's less incentivized to ascribe personal beliefs or creativity to your pieces, but rather reflect a kind of more impartial view.
Yeah. I mean, that is a big question, and I'm not really qualified to have an opinion on the matter because I'm really a literary specialist. But that is a big question around ChatGPT, certainly, because now you have software, legal software, and journalism software, and so on and so forth. So there is a format that you can just tweak. And then you think, well, to what extent is the person the author of the story? And then you run into all these kind of legalistic issues. Most publishers now have an IA specific kind of words into the contracts. I mean, first of all, is AI is not an author. So if your work is over a certain percentage and it differs from publisher to publisher, that legally it won't be acceptable. So there are lots of very complex legal issues surrounding whether the text that you submit is yours or not. And then there's all the other question about impartiality. But, it's an interesting question, but it's not really something that I'm qualified to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful. I'd like to read this little passage to engage in an interesting dialogue, maybe. I hope I do it justice. In her room, pen in hand, she dives into the stream of her mind. Like Mrs. Dalloway threading through London streets, her thoughts weave past and present. She captures fleeting moments, a lighthouse beam, a wave breaking, turning life's cotton wool into crystalline prose. From the depths of her inkwell rises a vision. The world itself, a vast novel, each soul a character interconnected. As she writes, pain subsides, replaced by the joy of creation. Her words, like Clarissa's flowers, arrange themselves into a pattern both beautiful and true. So, as you were writing, as you were speaking, and I agree with what you said, but I was just curious to conduct an experiment. So I gave it the Virginia Woolf paragraph and the challenge to write a short passage made of allusions. And it made this. So that's almost instant. And just as easily I did read it.
Yeah.
I think there's another, I think what you're pointing to,
Well,
I suggested the same thing, that there's all of this, but we can point to the missing part and it'll find it.
well,
The
I
thing
mean,
is, it doesn't have the necessity to find it. Yet, it has no reason to do that. It'll do it if we ask, but it won't do it on its own.
I wouldn't, technically, I mean, you could say that is elusive, but I wouldn't say so myself, because it's not tied into a bigger critical design of the whole, and you say, well, what's the whole? We don't know. It hasn't been created yet. But elusive technique is not just taking prefabricated chunks of other people's works and piecing it. That is not what allusion means in literature. Allusion in literature means something rather more crafted than that, and it has to fit into the overall design of the work of art as a whole, and it's not just a cobbling together of pre-existing sentences. That is not, this is what I say, this is why elusive technique it's a blow, because precisely of what you just said. Because you can hear little resonances, but it's like a pastiche, you know, a collage with no design, no intention, which is not what in literature we recognize as illusion.
This is where we're agreeing, because basically, as long as, so you amended illusion, and we could give the amended version, and it would respond, and we could amend it again, and it would respond. The thing that it wouldn't do is want to respond. Not yet. It has no drive to be elusive in the small or the large. It will do, but it doesn't know, it has no ananke in sort of ancient Greek sense of necessity.
Well, I mean, if that turned into a whole novel or a short story, and it was a homage or a critique of Mrs. Dalloway, like The Hours, for example, and it had sustained allusions like that, that could work, but that kind of little cobbling together in itself does nothing.
Thank you. That was really evocative. I think there's a question in here somewhere, but I'm not sure. I just want to tell you a couple of thoughts that came to mind as I was listening to you. The first, so I work on memoir and personal narrative, which would be, you would think, the genre of writing that might most require or be subtended by, as you said, the inner flow, right? And yet, what I started thinking was how convention-bound, how memoir, the most personal voices are the voices that can only emerge through and beyond convention and cliche. So that flow is an effect. It's not a point of departure, I would say. So I'm not sure that there even is an individual before the writing. I think that's an effect. And then the other thing I was wondering about is less about intentionality when it comes to a difference, because intentionality is also, you might say, a ruse to get you started. But aren't you really talking about the difference between a system with an unconscious and a system that doesn't have an unconscious?
Such big comments. I know. Is there an individual before writing? Now, there's a question. Well, I mean, I'm thinking of the kind of agitation or a little spark almost in your body when you have a thought, or maybe it's not even a thought, it doesn't even qualify as a thought, but something will register and you as a being will respond, and you will want to do something with, you don't even know what it is, but you have this impulse to make sense of it. And I suppose flow might sound too easy for the very difficult process that is. Julie will have a better idea of how to describe it. But talk about creativity. Once you get going, it's fun, but nobody feels that it's fun to embark on making sense of something that you don't know what it is, because you're in the dark and you've got to, you have nothing to go by, and you are just walking into the dark trying to make sense of what you can't see. And that is the creative process as articulated by so many people. That's exactly what it is, and it's frightening. You need a lot of courage. It's unrewarding. You are often lost. But, so flow is probably not the right word, but once you get going, you can't not do it because it's so compelling. And that's kind of the creative process, which is so valuable, because in that moment, you feel alive and life becomes revivified. which is one of the very few things that art can, it's kind of the magic of art, that you can make life more lifelike. So that's what it is. But it's such a big question about intentionality and, what is art. And so I think I better not foray beyond what I've carved out. It's very interesting to think about.
Great. Thanks so much. So I have one question. There's one common voice about the process of AI creating art, which is in such a process, the machines are only showing its ability to imitate, to learn, and therefore just like reforming what it has learned based on its previous data set. And this is like hard-coded by human-coded algorithm. And people are arguing that this process is not real creativity and it's only like combinational or explorational creativity. But people are always calling for real creativity nowadays, which is called the theoretically transformational one. And people are just like learning how, learning neuroscience, especially like cognitive neuroscience, can help people to approach helping computers to really get this kind of transformational creativity. I'm very curious, like if we try to explore the authentic kind of creativity from the side of like cognitive neuroscience, so how should we approach this? So in other words, like what should really the people like to do to learn and to explore in order to develop this kind of like real creativity that computers may obtain as like human artists would do in a process of like writing a piece of literature, composing a music, or generating like a picture or like even a video or a movie. So thank you.
Well, I mean, if I can I would just answer your question honestly, which is the whole premise, excellent one, is what I would call kind of left hemispheric, that it's about faster, stronger, better, more. And I think creativity is finding in yourself what is true for you and making sense of it. That is creativity. It's not, oh, somebody's done something wonderful, I'm just going to copy that, or somebody's won a big prize. That has very little to do with real creativity, and that we find meaning through. And if it's just a matter of selling your stuff on the market, having a career around it, it's not going to give you the revivification of life that I'm talking about. And I think living life with intensity, with joy, with meaning is the goal in the end. It's not necessarily about being in the fast lane. I mean, that may be fun from time to time, but that cannot be the foundation of anything worth pursuing as a central thread, I think. Was that very dismissive of your question? Sorry. But I kind of, for young people, I feel so almost anxious when young people can't see the whole purpose of the arts, which is to live your life and make sense of your life and find joy in that. And because these worries are not so central worries in the end, I think, for a human. I know, don't look so horrified.
I just want to answer to your very first question of being a jury member, what I thought. What it seemed to me that the submissions were premature. And
well, I mean, absolutely, because this is a university competition.
Yeah.
We are not going to, it wasn't professional level, yeah.
But I'm trying to build up an argument. So basically, what I felt was missing from the submissions that I saw was a sense of wrestling with the instrument. In other words, an invested engagement, interacting with the instrument in such a way that I walk away a different person, and possibly the machine learned something in the process as well. And so I'm not sure how you get that, given that it was open to just people who were just starting to test the system. But I think for me, the AI, I see the AI as an instrument that helps me to kind of evolve. And so basically, that's what I walked away with from that experience.
So to that end, what you're just saying, I think this year we might have another opportunity, if there's enough energy, to run a second edition with more time. So that depends on you guys, because you guys, putting the judges together. But it might be, we might have more entries, and it might evolve, and that evolution might actually be interesting as people get more familiar, as they, how they wrestle or interact with AI. So that's something that you guys can think about it, whether we can do a second edition. Now, going back to the illusion, which is very intriguing, I had a few reductionist thoughts, because, I'm from the sciences. And I wish we had William Wang here, because this is a person you need to go talk to about this. But if I understand some of that you see missing is, like you said, tying these references to sort of a bigger picture. And there might be a simple explanation for this, which is that right now, a lot of these models have a limit on how they sequentially look at texts, but just in little bits, just because otherwise all the number of parameters you have to look at all the interrelations explodes even beyond of what they already, now it's in the trillions of parameters. So that's one limitation now in those models, and so it might be an intriguing thing for you to actually look at as these architectures evolve and the amount of data they can handle gets even bigger than now, whether this is something that will be emerging later. And the reason I'm saying this is because about 7 years ago, I wrote a paper about the lack of the capabilities of object detectors. These are basically AIs are trying to find objects in understanding scenes. And some of you remember this about the giant toothbrush that I published, and it was made a big splash. And now that was in 2017 when we published that, and people all around the country were really thought that we were onto something, some deep limitation in machines, as many others through history, including chess, thought that this is something that machines will not achieve. And now once transformer architectures sort of were introduced, this thing that we thought was a limitation is gone. Now these machines can actually, they basically search for objects, and they understand, not to the full extent that humans, but they understand all these relationships that were not there before. So it's something to think about. That's really
something to see.
It's like
that would be incredible.
And William is the person that you can actually go and talk to, see if there's a technical reason why current AI models will not show that. So, anyway, sorry, a little bit long.
Since we're in Humanities Center. So I thank you so much, Sowon. That it was balm for my soul. So, and I really liked what you referred to, namely the Chinese 2,000-year tradition that writing establishes a moral relation to the world. And that reminded me of a quote by Toni Morrison: certain kinds of trauma visited on peoples are so deep, so cruel, that unlike money, unlike vengeance, even unlike justice or rights, or the goodwill of others, only writers can translate such trauma and turn sorrow into meaning, sharpening the moral imagination. a writer's life and work are not a gift to mankind, they are its necessity. And I think, with your talk, we can be assured that the humanities won't be replaced anytime soon by AI.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everyone.